Hello, everyone. My guests today are Dr. Jeffrey Jensen, who is the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine, and Dr. Johanna Richey, who is an Assistant Professor at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine. In today's episode, we discuss some of the really cool things that they're doing out at the Arizona program, high-tech things like artificial intelligence and training, and how robust the program is that a podiatric medical student goes through. We also talk about some of the transitions from residency and fellowship training to private practice and those things that are all involved with that. So please enjoy this great conversation I have with Dr. Jensen and Dr. Richey.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry. Ready for some thought-provoking cerebral whipping and the destruction of ridiculous medical dogma? Want to shift those stale, moldy old paradigms? Well then, don that thinking cap of yours. Get down in the cave and join our host, Dr. Stephen Barrett, for this week's episode. Let's start spelunking.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry, everybody. I've got two great guests for this episode, Dr. Jeffrey Jensen, who is the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine, and Dr. Johanna Richey, and you're an assistant professor, and you may have some PTSD because you were a student of mine a long time ago. So I apologize for that. But anyhow, welcome. And we're going to talk about basically curricula and the training of a podiatrist and how really I think it's just a fantastic profession.
Thank you for the invitation and so great to get together.
So,
yeah, it's really
likewise.
wonderful to be here.
So let's start out and talk about the Dean's Chat podcast, which both of you have been working on for quite a while. Give me some background, give the audience a taste of what they should look for in that podcast and how it's helping students and really everybody to know about the profession.
Sure. Joe, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, you go ahead and start with that one.
All right. So, Steve, about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to be on a podcast in a studio. And as I was looking around, I was thinking, wow, this is something that's kind of neat and something that perhaps could benefit our profession when you consider all the interesting doctors in different areas in podiatric medicine and the colleges and the residency programs. And coinciding with that, we were having a student enrollment issue within our profession. And so I asked the people at the studio, well, how does this work exactly? And next thing you know, I had written down 50 names of leaders in our profession that I thought would participate potentially in a podcast to really showcase or highlight our profession to the world and hopefully increase its visibility so that students would be interested in applying and looking into a career in podiatric medicine. So that's kind of the short story. And since then, we've interviewed deans of all the colleges. We've interviewed students from all the colleges, residency directors, political leaders through APMA or ABFAS or ABPM. I know that it's alphabet soup. I apologize, but
Right.
they're different organizations within our profession. And then Joe was kind enough. One day she came into my office and she said, "Hey, Jeff, I've got some friends I'm working with AO North America and the American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons." And she said, maybe I could get some of them to guest on your podcast. And I said, I'll make you a deal, Joe. They can come on the podcast if you co-host with me. And she said, maybe. And then next thing you know, Joe, I think we've recorded maybe 100 podcasts since then together, and I think we've been a good team, and I think truly the podcast has gotten significantly better and more interesting with Joe on board. So thank you, Joe.
No, thank you. You know, it's really funny, Steve, when if you would have asked me 2 years ago if I was going to be on a podcast or hosting a podcast, I would have probably laughed at you. I'm not a social media person by most accounts. But exactly as Jeff said, what I loved about the podcast that he had started was there was so much incredible history about our profession through people's stories. And so as I was listening to various guests, I was like, oh, Dr. Schuberth would be great. Dr. Ruck, we got to get him on. Dr. Mann would be amazing. And so I had talked a little bit to each of them. And, at this phase of their career, I think they're also interested in sharing their story and their history. And sure enough, it was the same thing. Like, well, only if you'll come on. And that moment of like reckoning, like, being asked to show up in that way. And It really has been such a pleasure, and it's just fun. It really is fun.
Yeah, when you know more about the history of your profession, it gives you that much more passion about your profession. And I think even for folks that are thinking about going into the profession, it's a beautiful canvas for them to see what this whole thing is about. Because I mean, if you think about it, it's a relatively young profession, and it has evolved so quickly. I mean, from when I came out to now, it's almost unrecognizable. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think, the schools have done a great job. But before we get into that, have you found that the podcast has helped spark more interest in applicants to the program?
Yes, it hasn't been fully quantifiable yet, Steve, because we're going out, and second year students in college are watching it, or third year students are watching it.
Right.
But I get calls from the colleges of podiatric medicine, and they say, "Hey, Jeff, we interviewed a student today that was introduced to podiatric medicine through the Dean's Chat podcast,"
Right.
and that warms my heart when I hear that, because that was one of the reasons we started it. And then what we also do is we put together playlists for each of the schools and colleges of podiatric medicine. And every time I interview a guest, or we interview a guest, we put them into the playlist that includes the college where they went to school, perhaps a work-life balance. I can add different playlists together so that I send those links for YouTube to all the different deans, and I said, here's your playlist for the year, and then they can share that with their admissions group, and hopefully it gives more visibility and gives students an opportunity at their own pace to learn about the different colleges and the profession.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And anytime you have this kind of a format, you get all these different folks with different backgrounds and able to share. It just really brings a lot to it, that a single individual couldn't do that,
You're right, and Joe and I are fortunate because we work with the Pod Populi podcast studios, and they do all the editing. They've got the beautiful facility. They make sure that the audio is right, the visuals right. We give them a lot of credit because really, Joe and our job is to bring in great guests, and
Right.
your episode's coming out in the next week or two, and I can't wait for everybody to see
I'm
it.
looking forward to that. Yeah, that was
There you
fun.
go.
We had a great time.
We do.
Well, let's jump into some stuff about the curriculum of a podiatric medical student versus the MDDO curriculum, because I don't know, how many schools are there now? 13?
No, there are 11 schools.
11? Okay. And how many of them are associated with a medical school?
There's 5 of them that are affiliated with DO schools.
Right.
2 or 3 of us are completely integrated with the basic sciences
Right.
where they're taking all the basic sciences together. And then there's 1 or 2 schools that have a medical school affiliated with them, but I'm not sure that they're integrated completely with the students' courses.
Yeah.
And then there's several that are freestanding.
I know the new school down at the Rio Grande Valley, part of the UT system, that was a kind of a big deal, really, to get that off the ground and everything for them. So let's talk about Arizona and how you guys are very integrated into the DO program there. Advantages, disadvantages. Give me a lay of the land on that. So if there's a potential student listening to this right now, or a parent of a potential student, they can get kind of an idea of why they should go to Arizona, because and I'm going to tell everybody I'm biased. I taught there. I love the place. I think it's fantastic. And, not that I don't like the other programs, but, familiarity is a big part of that.
Joe, would you like to take that to get going?
Sure. And I'm probably the most biased of anybody, having been a former alumni and now faculty. So again, the audience can take my opinion for whatever it's worth. But, I think there's a lot to be said for this idea of complete integration. As we continue to see more collaborative team approaches in medicine, being able to look at a patient from a holistic perspective, we don't just treat the foot, right? We don't just treat one part of the body. We treat people, and our specialty is focused primarily in ailments of the foot and ankle. but so many systemic manifestations occur in the feet. And so having that really solid foundation in our medicine and our basic science only makes us a stronger podiatric physician and surgeon. And so, in my opinion, I think that this is really ultimately the future of where education needs to go. Medicine is not simplifying, it's getting more complicated. Mm-hmm. Every field in medicine is getting more specialized. I have plenty of colleagues in other specialties that aren't managing their patients in the hospital. The internal medicine doctors are, and they're consulting as a specialist. And so in that realm, podiatry is no different. We are functioning as part of this team, and our area of expertise is in management of the lower extremity. So having that opportunity to be fully integrated for those first 2 years in anatomy and biochemistry, pharmacology, immunology, micro, all of those foundational courses, really, to me, is what the expectation should be for anyone that's looking into it.
I think that's a really excellent point, and I think you're seeing that in all of the different specialties, because I've been fortunate to have many guests on that were, one gentleman, for example, was a professor of obstetrics and gynecology down at University of Miami and became a functional medicine practitioner. And I had him and his wife on the show, and they were fantastic. And I asked them both point blank, well, how did you get into functional medicine? And their answer was, well, when I was teaching at University of Miami, none of my patients were getting any better because we weren't taking care of them as a patient. We were just so subspecialized. So, just looking through this really small window, and we weren't looking at the whole picture. And it struck them that they had to get on board with making the patient more healthy in order to take care of these things. And that was anathema to, where they were in their academic, professorships and this type of thing. So, and I think that's really what's happening. It happened to me when I started focusing on peripheral nerve and really dialed in on it, like in the early 2000s. Our hammer was, nerve surgery. But then we realized that there was so many patients that met the perfect criteria for a great result, but didn't, because they were inflamed. They just, and so we by default, we had to start looking at some of these things and actually going to a more functional medicine approach in order to get them better. I mean, it was crazy. Like, they would come in and, they would say, my A1C is 6, so I'm not diabetic. And their serum fasting insulin was 30. And, they had this whopping hyperinsulinemia that was causing their peripheral neuropathy. And nobody ever talked about that. And we were going to get them, we're not going to get them better unless we get them better metabolically. So no one was taking care of these patients. So I think the new podiatric medical students are going to have more functional medicine at their training, and hopefully, they're a little bit more prepared for it.
I think you're definitely right. And then as I see more and more residencies centered in academic health centers, their requirement is there to have a broad education, a medical education. You can't be just lasered in on the foot and ankle. And you see that all across the country. And that kind of the proof's in the pudding, when our students are rotating there and then they're matching to go there during residency programs. Joe and I hear all the time that the residency directors and the clerkship directors are impressed with our students' wealth of knowledge in medicine, not just podiatric medicine. So right. I think you hit the nail on the head with that, no doubt.
All right. So Joe, you talk about the first 2 years, basic sciences. Tell everybody what's in that. We've got anatomy, physiology, go through biochem, take us through that. And then let's go into the second 2 years, because I think they need to know about that as well.
Yeah. And forgive me, I mean, I don't have the schedule right in front of me, so I can certainly talk to the courses that I'm involved with. But generally speaking, first year is biochemistry and anatomy are the first two that they will take in terms of basic science foundational courses. And then they will add in neuroanatomy in the spring. They will go on to immunology, microbiology, pharmacology, pathology is a large course, physiology. And I believe I'm probably leaving out one or two big foundational courses. So I apologize to whomever those courses are involved with. But Histology has been kind of merged into anatomy along with embryology. Those courses are still present. They're just under the umbrella now of the anatomic sciences. And genetics is, I think, absorbed into biochemistry, if I remember correctly, in terms of how some of that kind of shakes out into the individual courses. But that's the kind of the bulk of the foundational courses.
So in that 2 years, not only does the podiatric medical student have to do all of the MDDO basic medical sciences, but aren't there a few other things added in there, like lower extremity anatomy and pathomechanics, some of these other courses?
Yeah, so then sprinkled in there, we'll add biomechanics, which is one of our foundational courses for podiatric medicine. Kind of how does the foot function? And then pathomechanics, how does the foot fall apart? We at Midwestern have a strong emphasis on surgical mechanics as well. So taking the things that the students are learning in their first and second year for biomechanics and then start to build upon that when we start talking about what can we do in the surgery realm and how does that impact foot function. And so kind of, again, building principles upon other principles. Other courses they'll take include general medicine courses, physical diagnosis. They have podiatric medical courses, just in terms of there's general pod med as well as podiatric surgery courses. So yeah, all of that is on top of their regular course load.
Yeah, so they have a pretty big load to carry that first 2 years.
Yeah, and because a lot of it gets put into summer courses, that's also how we can make it a little more manageable, where they start out kind of staggering some of these courses so they kind of get a little bit used to kind of the ground under their feet.
Before we continue with this great discussion, I just want to take a quick break to acknowledge this week's sponsor.
I'm constantly exploring new avenues to enhance well-being and address any health concerns. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to an exciting supplement called STEM Regen, which I take daily and genuinely believe could revolutionize your health journey as well. STEM Regen stands out as a game changer in the realm of wellness. Crafted from 5 potent plant extracts, it boasts a remarkable ability to stimulate the release of your body's own stem cells from your red bone marrow. Why is this significant? Well, stem cells are the superheroes of our body's natural repair system. They possess the extraordinary capacity to morph into various cell types, aiding in tissue regeneration and repair. As we age, the quantity of circulating stem cells in our system reduces significantly, impairing our body's ability to heal and rejuvenate itself effectively. STEM Regen steps in to counter this decline by kickstarting the release of stem cells into circulation, thereby bolstering your body's innate repair mechanisms. Once unleashed into your bloodstream, these mobilized stem cells actively seek out areas of damage or injury, initiating the healing process. By incorporating STEM Regen into your daily routine, you're essentially empowering your body to tap into its own regenerative prowess more efficiently. I firmly believe that STEM Regen could be a valuable addition to your wellness regimen, especially if you're seeking to fortify overall health and vitality, accelerate tissue repair, or expedite recovery from injury or illness. This first of its kind stem cell mobilizer is changing the game in regenerative medicine. Don't wait to unleash your body's innate healing capabilities. Visit stemregen.co/Dr. Steven, that's with a PH, and use the code SBPOD to get a 15% discount off your first order of STEM Regen. Hey Spelunkers, we're thrilled to kick off Season 6 with a fresh new look and the most exciting content we've ever delivered. This season, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of human optimization and understanding. But wait, there's more. We're giving back to our loyal listeners with an exclusive giveaway each and every episode of Season 6. That's right, prizes are waiting just for you. So how can you join in on this fun? Well, it's simple. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and here's the magic touch. Comment, "Let's Spelunk" on any of our Season 6 YouTube videos to enter. Of course, please add anything else you'd like to your review. Don't miss your chance to explore, learn, and win with the Pod of Inquiry. Let's spelunk into the wonders of Season 6 together.
And then your clerkships in your fourth year, and in between that, we're layering on four different curriculums: pod med, pod surg, biomechanics, and general medicine. And then the interesting part about that, Steve, is the basic science programs, they're integrated with the DOs. So the DOs have 250 students in a class. So you add our 40. Well, then when you get into our specific curriculum areas in podiatric medicine, surgery, biomechanics, and gen med, they're only with their classmates of 40 students. So one of the reasons we've built out this beautiful lab is so that 40 students can get a tremendous experience, whether they're in the power instrumentation portion of the lab, the podiatric medicine part of the lab, the gait analysis, or other non-invasive vascular assessments, ultrasounds, things like that. So we're trying to give them that opportunity to have hands-on experiences, which will really make a difference as they start their rotations in their third year.
Absolutely. The more hands-on, not only will they have a greater passion for what they're doing, but they'll also be more prepared when they get to residency. I always taught our students that if they can sew really well in their first surgery rotations, they'll get to do a lot more once that surgeon knows that they can close a wound, nicely and efficiently. So yeah, it's a good thing. What about then the third and fourth year? Tell the folks what that's like.
So they finish boards, right? They take boards in second year at the end of their second year. They get a little time off, and then they finish with a quarter of more advanced surgical experiences, just kind of finishing off the curriculum before they go out on rotations in October. In October of their third year, they start clinical rotations in the Phoenix area and in Tucson. And those rotations vary from hospital-based rotations to different practices. We try to pick our preceptors and the docs we work with so that they get kind of an experience that would resemble a clerkship experience in their fourth year, where they're working up patients, they're doing differential diagnoses, they're going into the OR, they're really putting a lot of time into radiographs and the physical exam. All of that comes together, and it's not easy for it to come together. No. And by the time we get to the point where they're leaving to go off on rotations, we're bringing them back for competency-based exams. We've got our standardized patients. It's really a controlled area where the students can show off how they've integrated all the information they've learned, not only in the clinical experience, but from basic sciences too. It's really a neat opportunity to give us a gauge as to how our students are progressing coming up to boards part 2, which is in January of their fourth year.
So once they have finished their second boards, then they're pretty much now getting ready to match to a residency program, right?
Yeah, I kind of jumped ahead there. We let our students do 2 clerkship opportunities at a hospital somewhere in the country that has an affiliated residency program. That's kind of the definition of a clerkship. And we give them 2 months at the end of their third year, and then the first 6 months of the fourth year to actually go and do those rotations. And we may be a little bit unique, Joe, in that we tell our students, we're not really interested in you getting a schedule of local clerkships at residency programs. We want them to experience what our profession has to offer, whether it's in Seattle, Portland, Texas, Florida, you name it. We want them to experience the best educational opportunity possible, and in doing so, they will obtain those top residency programs. So you're right, they take boards in January. They also do residency interviews in January. We give our students the month off to do boards and residency interviews, and the residency interviews is a long process. I mean, it's a couple week process around the country in localized or centralized areas. This year, it's going to be in Chicago, but then they finish off their mandatory rotations and graduate in May, end of May.
Very good, very good. And you guys have a great match percentage, as I understand. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, Joe, I may touch on that just a little bit because that's important. Melanie Violent, who's faculty here back in about 10 years ago, our profession was having an issue with having more students than we had residency programs. So we instituted a balance committee nationwide, and Dr. Violent headed up that committee. And really, we made a tremendous effort to go out and start residency programs so that we had opportunities for every single graduate in podiatric medical schools to go into a residency training program. And I think that's something that's really unique about our profession. We're not just taking those 4 years and saying, okay, we're done, pass them on. We're actually looking out for those students to ensure they have training opportunities postgraduate.
Well, I think that was one of the big controversial subjects. I thought it was maybe more than 10 years ago, but maybe even when I was there in 2006, 2007, when the school was just starting out, is that you'd have these people that they couldn't match. And it's like, well, what do? They had to either go get a preceptorship, and then that wasn't going to cut the licensure requirement in many states. So,
that happens a lot in DO and MD programs. Not everybody gets a residency
Right.
program.
Yeah.
And as the pendulum swings, right, it swung over the years. I remember there was a shortage when I graduated in the early 90s, and then now we've got more residency programs than we have students graduating. So that pendulum always swings back and forth. And, there's a lot of challenges at graduate healthcare right now, everything from cost of education to more seat availability, fewer students coming through the undergraduate institutions. So it's challenging times for graduate health education right now.
Well, is some of that due to increased regulation? Because, when I went through it, it was pretty much everything was pretty laissez-faire compared to now. Everything, to get hospital privileges back in the day, you showed up and you pretty much did the mirror test, and if you breathed into the mirror and it fogged up a little bit and you had the license, they would let you in. But now it's a lot more difficult. It's incredibly more regulated.
I think maybe we're talking about a couple different things, because I agree with you. The regulations and everything is off the charts. Joe, would love your opinion on that, but I wanted to comment on, the ability of a DO school through their accrediting body, or the podiatry schools through our Council on Podiatric Medical Education. They don't take market forces into play when they open up a new school. Their responsibility is purely, do you meet the 8 standards that a school needs to deliver a podiatric medical education? If you do, you can open up a new school tomorrow, even in light of the fact that there's fewer applicants. So,
Right.
Today, Steve, we'll kind of show our age here, but when we went to school, there were 6 schools? Now
6 or 7, yeah.
Now there's
Right.
11,
Right.
but there's fewer students applying to podiatric medical school. So it's a different framework today than it was 20, 30 years ago.
I don't think that's correlative to the demand for the specialty either.
It's not. It has nothing to do with it.
Right, because what I see is there's just a tremendous demand for this type of specialization, and there's not enough. There's not enough people to take care of all of the problems that are out there.
Right. So I think that, it's a challenge, because we just, as we opened 2 new schools in the last 2.5 years, LECOM in Pennsylvania, and then the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley School in Harlingen, Texas. And there's tremendous opportunity. But it's funny, because when the applicant pool's smaller and then you expand the number of seats, you want to make sure we maintain high quality students coming in. You don't want to lessen the entrance requirements. That fogging the beer thing you talked about.
Yeah. No, I was talking about after you got out and you were getting out. Yeah. I remember, actually, this is pretty crazy, but it was, I don't even want to say the year, because people say, no, you're not 106 years old. But, but I remember when I went into practice, there was a new hospital, and I went up to see about, applying for privileges. And they said, well, get all your licensure and that type of stuff and up to us. And I said, well, what about getting temporary privileges so that I can get started? And they said, well, how about next week? What day do you need in the OR? And I was like, wait, this is crazy. Now, these kids come out and they may wait 6 months to get through their credentialing process. And then they may wait 2 years before they're fully credentialed into the different insurance programs so that they can get paid for it. It's really a very sick system in a way.
Very much so. Joe, you could comment on that. You've seen that in multiple environments.
Yeah, and not to totally hijack the conversation because we could literally talk for hours on that topic alone. But I think your point, Steve, about just getting onto insurance panels, like that is a very complex and time intensive process. And so at this stage, having some pre-planning ahead, this is also why now we're seeing fellowship programs are trying to recruit fellows earlier. Like if you decide after my residency training, I want to go in and do a specialization with a fellowship, they are trying to recruit residents, sometimes even in their second year, because to just get all of the credentialing done to get them into the hospitals for that fellowship. I mean, those processes take time. And unfortunately, there isn't an easy solution or bypass to that. So, and in terms of hospital regulation, we've seen that across the board for so many different aspects, and a lot of it does come down to things like reimbursement. But the only point that I do think is worthwhile to say is, I do think that this is some of the reasons too that students and residents want to get board certified. Is there is something that stands behind a board certification when you go through a process where there is some vetting that's been done, someone that's double checking and making sure, is this person, does this make sense that this person is functioning in the role that they are saying they're capable of? And so having some kind of standard behind what we are and who we stand for and what we are capable of doing, I am a big proponent of that.
Yeah, I've actually run into that personally because we've had, I think, 6 or 7 nerve fellows now, and we're just getting ready to start interviewing again for the next cycle. But the problem is all right, okay, so you take one of these greatly trained individuals, and they are very well trained now, and they start their fellowship day one. It may take us 3 to 6 months just to get them the ability to walk into the hospital. Well, now, all right, even though they're working under us, they're all licensed, they have their med mal, everything is all nice and tidy, buttoned up. They're still, basically just having to hang out in the clinic. So now, well, what do? Do you make it a 1.5-year fellowship? Or, so it's the system kind of punishes its own if you think about it.
And now a message from our sponsor.
Well, folks, if you are over 40 and you are not using a supplement to augment nitric oxide production, you should really rethink that. This molecule is absolutely imperative to the health of so many bodily functions, not the least of which is cardioprotection. If you have any question on nitric oxide, I suggest that you register with Approved Medical Solutions and begin receiving their educational emails. I never miss a day of nitric oxide supplementation. That's how important it is. Long overdue, Approved Medical Solutions created the only nitric oxide replenishment formula without oxalates. Approved Medical Solutions does not use beet, spinach, or arginine. Approved Medical Solutions is proud to offer our audience their oxalate-free nitric oxide formula. If you are not a healthcare provider, you can still get started by going to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and use the code SBarrett at checkout, and you'll receive a 10% medical discount savings. You can register to receive educational emails without any purchase. For licensed practitioners, you too can go to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and get registered today. They have unique bundles for all of the full-fledged spelunkers of the plot of inquiry. Use Pot of Inquiry at checkout after registration. Here's a little secret. If you order their testing strips and test every patient for a few clinic days, you will see every one of them be deficient. When they see this result, they will want you to start them up immediately. Now, thanks to Approved Medical Solutions, you can give them the best care without the worry of oxalates.
I agree with you completely. And to Joe's point, that's why they keep interviewing second-year residents, knowing they'll give them a full year if they're coming in the fellowship to get all their credentialing done.
But the problem, and we've done that. We've actually engaged a second-year resident, but we can't get them anything going because they don't have a license in the state until they finish their residency. So now you have the licensure issue. Then, and that precedes all of the hurdles from private practice insurance, private insurers, Medicare, Medicaid, all of those, anything that's going to reimburse you. And the hospital privileges, they're not going to give you hospital privileges until you have the license in the state. So it's a system that I think really needs to be changed, because these are very high functional individuals under a lot of debt. They've gone through a lot of things that nobody else goes through and can understand the dedication that these folks have. And then to punish them like that is just, it's a crime, in my opinion.
Well said. I totally agree. Too many moving pieces and nobody really has control of their own life.
Exactly. And it's absolutely insane, the difference in scope of practice from one state to another. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. You're this side of the state line, you can do this. If you walk into the other side of the state line, you can't. I mean, it's just like, well, I got to make sure I know what state I'm in today.
No doubt.
Yeah.
It needs a major league overhaul, but kind of where to even start sometimes, right?
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you guys the questions, because you've got the intellectual firepower in that arena. I don't.
Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this is also some of the really exciting parts of areas of growth in the profession. There are certainly areas that things that have been evolving over time, and certainly there have been great strides in standardizing more and more kind of what scope of practice is, but there are variations. And again, that's something that's kind of unique to our profession. One of the benefits too of having our students, or encouraging our students to travel across the country for their externships, is to help let them start to get an experience or an exposure to that. What does that mean? What does this look like for me? This is an area that I think that I want to go back to, and they can go and have those kind of conversations. I know this is certainly areas, again, not to sidestep the conversation completely, but certainly that some of the political organizations have been looking at, and there are not easy answers, is the best that I can ascertain from the people I've talked to, but hopefully opportunities for continued improvement and growth in the future.
Yeah, no, it's not an easy thing. It's a very complex thing. And then, I think some of these states that are very restrictive are really punishing their own citizens, because nobody wants to go there. These highly trained people that are coming out of their 3-year residencies, why am I going to go to a state like X that doesn't let me do what I'm trained to do? And they don't realize that it's a catch-22 that they just are in, that they're depriving their citizens really ultimate care, if you think about it that way.
And that's really where that opportunity, I think, kind of lies, is, at this point, and Jeff had commented on that, certainly when I went through residency, it was, generally speaking, it was like, oh, these are the top 10 programs, and those are the ones you really want to go to. Right. And that's really not how it is now. We've had such massive improvement at the quality of training that now you could literally, throw a dart across the country and we could be like, oh, there's a great program in that city or that state. Right. And so, because there have been opportunities for people to take the things that they've learned and migrate and move around the country and educate people maybe about what they are capable of doing. And this is one of the things that's actually been really fun, talking to different people's experiences on the podcast, and tell us what this was like. Like, how did you get ankle privileges in your state? And some of the discussions there of it helps kind of show to what we are capable of doing, and being willing to stand behind the work that we do and be proud of the work that we do. Right. We've talked about, we have a branding problem in our profession. Are we foot and ankle surgeons? Are we podiatrists? Are we podiatric medicine? Like, what is podiatry? And it's in fairness, part of our own issue, because we call ourselves different things and we advertise maybe differently. But at the end of the day, we are doing the work of treating the lower extremity. And so I think having this option of, you can train in one part of the country, and you're right, states might start to realize we have an underserved area. We need this kind of care. Mm-hmm. What are the barriers? Why aren't we getting access to providers that are providing this? And those are opportunities, again, for good change to happen. Well, it's slow, but I'm optimistic.
Well, the Indian Health Service and the VA, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you can be licensed in one state and you can go to any of those facilities throughout the United States and you're fine. You're good to go. All right. And so that mitigates the problem right there. Why isn't anybody working on a federal level to say, listen, this is all these states should be commensurate, and that this is going to solve that problem. And reciprocity, I mean, do we really need 50 state boards? I mean,
That's such a good point.
you know,
To that end, Steve, little shout out to APMA, and their advocacy efforts are tremendous. I mean, they really are looking out for our profession from an advocacy perspective at the state level. They are fighting some of the state battles, if you will, for scope of practice. And really, that, if you think about it, that's really what a national organization needs to be doing to protect its constituency. So I do, my hat's off to them, because I go on their advocacy site a lot and look at the different things they're working on, and they are going to bat for our profession, and I'm really pleased with that.
Yeah, well, we have to have that for sure. And it's a small profession. But Joe, I think you made a great point. What are we? Because one of the things I think that's the beautiful thing about podiatry is that it's got a lot of bandwidth. Even though it's considered a small subspecialty, you can be, biomechanics oriented, non-surgery, surgery, limb salvage. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's got tremendous amount of opportunities. There's a lot of latitude. And I don't think maybe the students, when they're applying to the schools, realize that they have this much bandwidth. Maybe that's something that should be shared, because just because you go into a general surgery program doesn't mean you're going to be a general surgeon. It could be, oh, that's my stepping stone to plastics or whatever. So there's a tremendous amount of bandwidth, but I don't think the average student really realizes that.
There's no doubt. Go ahead, Joe. You take it first, and I'll add a little bit.
No, I agree. And that's, again, one of the things that I thought was so interesting when Jeff had started the podcast is really just tell me about your experiences. Tell me about how you got where you are, what you're doing, why are you doing that, what got you interested. And it's so fascinating to hear how people find out about it, or, very few people. We actually were just talking about, we had interviews this morning, and I was with Dr. Warren Joseph, and he's just so spectacular. And he had said, very few people come out of the womb saying, I want to be a podiatrist. And it's accurate. Like, people don't know what that really is unless they've had a personal experience, a family member. And so the way that, these winding roads, and so just awareness, trying to help, showcase what the profession is. And to your point, Steve, within this specialty, we have subspecialties. And even now you can have a true niche practice and be wildly successful if you can do what you're wanting to do. And so it's really, I think, an incredible opportunity as it continues to get bigger and bigger. And I actually think at some point, residency might actually have to start to expand to either adequately train everyone in the breadth of which we now practice podiatry, or having multiple fellowships that people might consider doing, because the amount in every aspect, podopediatrics, plastic surgery, limb reconstruction and salvage, nerve repair. I mean, your area alone has had this massive expansion in terms of what people are doing, that you can focus your practice only on that. Right. And so it's incredibly exciting. But to your point, I don't think people know it's a best kept secret in medicine, but we don't want it to be a secret.
No, it's a beautiful thing, but it's not being exploited to the people who are looking for a great career.
I think that's being addressed even at a national level now, Steve. Joe and I have worked with APMA, and we're looking at branding efforts that have not really taken place in the past. When we interview students, one of the neat things, and this is backing up a little bit, but they'll say, I didn't know anything about podiatry, but once I learned about podiatry and I started shadowing doctors, they were the happiest doctors that I shadowed because of exactly what you're talking about. They've gravitated to an area of practice that they enjoy doing. Their practice resembles what they like to do and what they're good at. So the students that have an opportunity to shadow with them think that podiatry is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's just getting that message out at an earlier time to prospective students. And I think we're making some progress in those areas.
Yeah, no, I think that, that's so true. It's just a matter of exposure. I taught over here at Kennesaw State a course called Introduction to Clinical Medical Research for 3 or 4 years, and I had like, it was a small class, just like 10. But the way it was is that they had to come and rotate in our office, and these were all, pre-med that really didn't know much about podiatry at all. And then once they got into it, it's like, wow, I didn't, I shadowed with an ophthalmologist the other day, and I, this is pretty cool stuff. Not to say that ophthalmology was bad, but it was like I had no idea of the breadth of what you all are doing. So I mean, those are, it's just like anything else. You don't know how good a chocolate milkshake is until you tasted it. And so the more we can get the younger applicants into, shadowing and in the offices, I think that would be a very good way to foster it as well.
Joe, I think you hit it on the head. You've mentioned several times opportunities, and Joe's got a unique way of seeing these challenges and then turning them into opportunities. And I think that's what our profession needs right now. We need to highlight these opportunities to a group of students that, like you said, you don't know what a chocolate shake tastes like till you have one. Same deal. Exactly. Yeah. Perfect analogy.
So, what's the future of, people are talking about that podiatry in 50 years may not even be a separate, other than maybe a subspecialty of a DO or MD program. What, if you could forecast what you think is going to happen 50 years from now, what would you say?
I'll totally jump on that one.
Go for it.
I actually would not be surprised if some specialties start to consider our model. Again, that's a pretty bold statement. There's a lot to be said for that. But as I have had opportunities to engage with other medical specialties and talking about, the traditional medical model as it stands now, where you get 4 years of just generic training and then you go out and you specialize later, people are recognizing the cost of that, not just the financial cost, but the time, the trade-off that people are making. Part of the reason perhaps we have seen regression in healthcare applications across the nation for any part of medicine. I mean, nursing has had it. Every aspect of medicine has had a drop in people interested in going into healthcare. And there's a lot of reasons that, again, a whole separate podcast to maybe unpack that. But I think what is really unique and really fantastic about podiatry is this idea that you have the opportunity to still be a medical doctor and surgeon, but you start that specialization right in graduate school. And so having the opportunity to start that process in the educational pathway allows us to get people into the operating room a little bit sooner, with the expectation, obviously, that they are safe and that they are capable. And so some of the interesting trends, I think, in the future of surgery are some things that we've been incorporating certainly over the last couple of years, but simulated experiences for students before they're in the operating room with a real live patient, having opportunities to not just practice suturing and sawbones, but on cadavers. And Steve, you had done this when I was a student, and I remember it was such an outstanding experience. And everyone goes through general anatomy and then lower extremity anatomy, which is unique in and of itself. But to then have the opportunity on fresh frozen cadavers, which are different than our preserved cadavers, to see what happens with a tendon transfer when you reroute it through the leg, those kinds of experiences, I think we're going to see a lot more of a shift to that. There's an incredible opportunity in terms of what AI is going to be able to do, summarizing how it's going to impact probably every aspect of what we do and how we do it. But I think from a student perspective, something that's very fair is, if I have access to the whole world in the palm of my hand, why do I need to sit through 4 years of lectures, right? Like, how do we start to recognize that knowledge is going to be a commodity, but wisdom is not? So how do we help this transition of using knowledge in a way that is applicable, helping students gain skills, but they have to have a foundation. They have to have a baseline understanding of principles. and navigating then how do we simulate things to keep things safe, especially in a world where everything is being squeezed from a time perspective. So I think that's going to be a really exciting area as technology continues to improve with simulation and even things like VR and augmented reality. And I think it's really going to be it's really exciting.
No, I agree with you. And, and that was one of the things when I taught there, I wanted to try to get you all into cadavers as soon as I could, because I realized even at the first year, you all were ready for that. And I don't know, Jeff, what we had them doing little, V to Y flaps and rotational skin flaps before they'd finished their first year. It was incredible, and I thought that built a lot of passion, and then it made them see, well, this is what I want to do. I have to really be good at the other stuff so that I can do what I want to do. And so.
I may just piggyback. You're so spot on, Joe. I wanted to share with you something that Warren Joseph shared with me from Notebook LM. He took 26 PDFs on osteomyelitis and he dumped them into this AI program, and it spit out a 23-minute podcast of all the evidence-based research from those articles. Truly, it's not going to be 50 years, Steve. It's going to be the next 5 to 10 years. And I could make a case that we could start a podiatry school with AI's assistance in the basic sciences and push those kids through the basic sciences in a year and a half and introduce clinical educations at hot podiatry spots around the country, Denver, Portland, Seattle, you name it. And we could give them a degree in 3 years, no problem.
Wow.
I think it's going to be, but how do you teach passion, compassion, empathy, all the different variables that go into being a doctor? Because just to quote Joe, knowledge is a commodity. It's all the other soft skills, the emotional intelligence, the interfacing with colleagues, the interfacing with patients, it's not easy. That's why that learning, that in residency experience is so important. But the actual foundational experience that we're delivering at the college, I think could be shrunk tremendously. I could make an effort right now, just to give you an example, at Midwestern University, we have 2 DO programs, right? One in Downers Grove, one in Glendale. They're graduating over 500 students a year, about as many as we are in podiatry. There's no question we could take the best physiologist from Miami podiatry, the best neurologist from one of the schools, the best pharmacologist from one of the schools, and with the exception of lower extremity anatomy, we could probably teach all the basic sciences online at this point.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's no doubt.
To a degree, right?
Right.
So I think we're going to be seeing some hybrid models coming in the near future. And I think that we're going to have a monumental change in the educational process in medicine in general, Joe, just to reiterate what you said. But it's not going to take 50 years. It's going to be here before you know it.
All right.
Well, can I piggyback on that just real quick? Because
Yeah,
I think one thing though, if we learned anything trying to teach through COVID, is there is something that's lost in the engagement with online learning. No. And so this is the stuff that, again, like I don't have the answers yet. I'm really excited to kind of piece it out and figure out what worked, what didn't work, right? But what I definitely appreciated that maybe I didn't appreciate going into the COVID teaching experience is you think, oh, it's just giving a lecture. I can give a lecture, whether it's through the computer or whether it's in a classroom, right? It's exactly the same. But it was absolutely not exactly. It was completely different, because even trying to interact or ask questions live in a virtual format, students are kind of talking over, like there's no raising your, they try to make the little things. It's just not as seamless. There's something about that engagement that gets lost. And so figuring out, to Jeff's point, okay, how do we take the stuff that can be formatted and put in an online format? And then how do we engage the learners in a way that makes it applicable, makes it real, that they can understand concepts and utilize and synthesize and apply this information? And I don't know if we will be able to achieve that in the same way virtually. Again, I'm not saying no, I'm saying I'm not sure, because even in small group breakout sessions, there are some things that might be missed. And so figuring those things out over the next couple of years, I think will be really interesting.
No, I agree with you 100%. And there is only so much, in my opinion. I agree with you, Jeff. I think I'm starting to use AI more. You have to be very careful with it because it'll make up references that don't exist. And so you have to be a little bit careful with it. But the purpose of what we're doing is to make folks really proficient and good and great diagnosticians and great treaters.
Mm-hmm.
And so however that has to happen, it's probably going to be a little bit of a hybrid model, I would think, because like Joe made mention of, is that there's so much nonverbal communication. I mean, when you're on a rotation and you're watching a surgeon work, if you're really dialed into that moment in time, you're noticing a lot of things that are not even being said. How does he carry himself? How did he communicate with the patient after or the patient's family after the surgery was done? Those are things that AI is never going to be able to do because this is a face-to-face, eyes-to-eyes situation. But I agree, there's got to be ways to streamline it. In Europe, medical school, you go in after 2 years and you're done in 6. So it's not 8. So there's ways to do it. But anyhow, well, guys, I got to wrap this up, but I love talking to you. I've learned more. And I'm proud to have been at your institution. And I think what you're doing is really fantastic. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity, Steve. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
As you know, I'm passionate about learning new ways to address health concerns. Moreover, before I recommend any treatment or supplement, I always try it on myself. Today, I want to share my experience with Troche. I have investigated other phytocannabinoid formulas and found that, in general, they were not consistent or reliable in their results. What impressed me about the Troche delivery technology is that each rapid-release tab is engineered to provide fast-acting, long-lasting, reliable delivery of phytocannabinoids to support your health and well-being. Many physicians understand the importance of using phytocannabinoids for physical discomfort, sleep issues, and mood. But if the formula is not reliable, most patients will give up, never experiencing the real benefits. I put this to the test on myself and actually tracked my progress. This graph shows my results for reducing stress. Troche is so serious about how well their product works, they partnered with People Science to provide the Troche Tracker health assessment application that lets you monitor your progress and works with you to accomplish your wellness goals. If you are a patient, click the link below and the patient button to register for Troche Tracker. Assess your baseline health metrics and receive a free Troche sample in addition to getting preferred patient pricing on all products. If you are a clinician interested in adding Troche to your practice, click the link below and then the clinician button to register for a wholesale affiliate account or go to the link above.
I hope you all enjoyed today's show and got some truly empowering knowledge out of it. You can always follow up on anything we talked about in the show notes found at our website, podofinquiry.com. If you think you might have tickled just a few neurons inside that cerebral cortex, please spread the word to your friends and colleagues and tell them that they need to get spelunking. Also, if you can take a minute to leave a review on your podcast provider of choice, and especially Apple Podcasts, that would greatly help the show and be so appreciated, provided it's positive. And if not, then just keep your pie hole shut and stay down in that cave. Let's keep spelunking.
This podcast is designed for informational purposes only and does not constitute any medical or surgical consulting advice or imply a development of any physician-patient relationship. The opinions of guests who are featured on the show are not necessarily the opinions of Dr. Barrett or the production team. This podcast is owned solely by Barrett Medical and Surgical Media, LLC. While the show is highly oriented for physicians and healthcare providers, anyone interested in the improvement of human performance and understanding will find this a welcome goblet to sip from, or guzzle. However, no representation or warranties are made in any way whatsoever on this podcast for any products, techniques, or other things discussed. Invited guests are not vetted by the Pod of Inquiry for their qualifications and may have a direct or indirect financial interest in what they present and discuss on the show. The Pod of Inquiry disclaims any responsibility from anything taken from the show and used personally or professionally. It is a responsibility of the listener to perform their own due diligence prior to the implementation of any ideas, products, techniques, or anything talked about on the show.